Welcome to a deep dive into the world of automotive software. We're going to be exploring the AUTOSAR Com module. It's a key player in how all the different parts of your car talk to each other. Think of it like the unsung hero behind everything from your engine control to your fancy infotainment system.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how much we rely on this module without even realizing it.
Absolutely. And we've got a pretty dense but insightful document here, the Specification of Communication AUTOSAR, CPR 2411. It's packed with details about how this module manages signals, data, and even security, stuff most of us never even think about.
It's true, we often take for granted just how much sophisticated communication is happening under the hood of our cars.
Right, like it's just expected to work flawlessly. But there's a lot of complexity going on behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. And this document actually reveals a long history of innovation going all the way back to 2005, when the AUTOSAR standard first emerged.
Wow, 2005, that's a while ago in the tech world.
It is, and what's fascinating is that even back then, they were already laying the groundwork for things like handling large data types, which is essential for the multimedia systems we have today.
So this isn't just some static piece of software. It's been evolving alongside car technology for over 2 decades. It's almost like a time capsule of automotive software development.
Exactly, and if you look closely at the change history, you'll see how the COM module has adapted to some pretty major shifts in the industry.
Like what kind of shifts are we talking about?
Well, for instance, in 2010, they added communication protection features. And this was way before connected cars were really a thing.
So they were already thinking about security risks back then. That's interesting.
Yeah, it shows they were thinking about data integrity long before most people even considered cars as potential targets for hackers.
That's a really good point. It challenges the assumption that cybersecurity in vehicles is a new concern.
Right? It's been a concern for a while within the industry.
So it seems like the folks behind AUTOSAR have been ahead of the curve on that front.
They've definitely been proactive.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of how this COM module actually works. What are the core functions it performs to keep all those signals and data flowing smoothly?
Well, at its heart, the COM module is all about managing the signals that travel between different electronic control units, or ECUs.
ECUs.
Think of these ECUs as the various brains controlling different parts of your car. The engine, the brakes, the entertainment system, and so on.
So like each ECU is specialized for a particular function.
Exactly, and the COM module provides a way for these ECUs to communicate with each other using a standardized language.
So it's like a universal translator for all the different electronic components in the car.
That's a great analogy.
And I'm guessing this is where those IPDUs come into play, those interaction layer protocol data units mentioned in the document.
You got it. The COM module takes signals from the ECUs and packages them into these neatly formatted IPDUs.
Okay, so it's like putting the message into a standardized envelope for delivery.
Exactly, and these IPDUs are then transmitted over the vehicle's internal network, kind of like sending data packets over the internet, but within the confines of your car.
That makes sense. It needs a structured way to send all that information around without things getting jumbled up.
Exactly, structure and reliability are key.
But it's not just about sending. It also needs to receive and process incoming IPDUs, right?
Absolutely. On the receiving end, the COM module unpacks those IPDUs and delivers the signals to their intended destinations.
So it's like a two-way communication system.
Precisely. And it also handles some pretty clever routing and gateway functions.
Okay, break that down for me.
Yeah.
What do you mean by routing and gateways in this context?
Well, imagine a signal needs to go from your engine control unit to your infotainment system to display something on the dashboard.
Okay, I can see that happening.
The COM module acts like a traffic controller, figuring out the most efficient path for that signal to travel across the network.
So it's not just about sending the message. It's about making sure it gets to the right place.
Exactly. And sometimes a signal needs to be relayed or translated between different parts of the network. That's where gateways come in.
Gateways like a bridge between different networks.
Exactly. They help ensure smooth signal flow.
So it's not just blindly passing messages along. It's actively managing the flow of information to make sure everything gets where it needs to go.
It's a very dynamic system.
This is starting to sound incredibly complex. It's like a whole hidden world of data management happening inside our cars.
It really is. And we haven't even touched on the cool stuff like signal values, complex data types, and security yet.
I know, right? There's so much more to uncover. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Exactly. Each layer reveals something new and fascinating.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. I can't wait to unpack those features and see what other surprises this document has in store.
I think you'll be quite impressed by what we find.
Welcome back. So, last time we left off talking about all the cool stuff where we can get into like signal values, complex data types, and especially that whole security aspect. It just blows my mind to think our cars could be vulnerable to hacking like that.
It's a valid concern for sure. And it's one that the automotive industry is taking very seriously these days.
Yeah, I mean, you hear stories about cars getting hacked,
Yeah.
and it's kind of freaky to think about what could happen.
Yeah. Especially as our cars become more connected and reliant on software, the risks just keep increasing.
Right, so this document actually calls out security events specifically as something the COM module is designed to handle.
It does. And it's an important part of the overall AUTOSAR security concept.
Okay, so what kind of security events are we talking about here? Like someone hacking into my car's Bluetooth and blasting polka music.
Well, that would certainly be annoying, but we're talking about much more serious threats than that.
Okay, so like what kind of stuff?
Think about things like unauthorized access to critical systems, data breaches, even manipulation of how the vehicle behaves.
Whoa, okay, so like someone taking control of my car remotely.
That's the kind of scenario that security measures are designed to prevent.
That's some serious stuff. So how does this seemingly simple COM-M module actually deal with those kinds of threats?
Well, it's not like having antivirus software on your laptop, but it does employ some clever mechanisms.
Okay, like what?
You've got things like secure communication protocols, authentication processes, and even intrusion detection systems.
Okay, lots of technical terms there. Can we break those down a bit?
Sure, let's start with secure communication protocols.
Okay.
Basically, that means encrypting the messages sent between those ECUs.
Encryption. So like scrambling the messages so no one can read them unless they have the key.
Exactly. It helps prevent eavesdropping and makes it much harder for someone to tamper with the data being exchanged.
Okay, that makes sense. What about authentication?
Authentication is all about verifying that only authorized components are allowed to send and receive messages on the network.
So like a digital bouncer at the door of each ECU, checking IDs before letting any messages through.
I like that analogy.
And what about those intrusion detection systems? Are those like alarms that go off if something suspicious is happening?
You could say that. They're constantly monitoring the network for any unusual activity.
Unusual activity, like what?
Things like weird message patterns or attempts to access sensitive data. If something seems off, they can trigger alerts or even take steps to isolate the potential threat.
That's pretty impressive. It's like having a whole security team working behind the scenes.
It's a multi-layered approach to security.
It's wild to think that this whole cybersecurity battle is going on beneath the surface of our cars.
It's a reality of the modern automotive world.
And it sounds like the COM module is a key player in keeping things secure.
It definitely has a crucial role to play.
Okay, so we've talked about how the COM module manages signals and data, and even how it handles security threats. But there's still so much more to this document. One thing that caught my eye was this concept of a minimum delay timer, or MDT.
Ah, yes, the MDT. It's a simple yet very effective mechanism.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
You see, if you had multiple ECUs all trying to send messages, simultaneously it could create a real traffic jam on the network.
Oh yeah, like everyone trying to talk at once.
Exactly. The MDT ensures that there's a tiny pause, a minimum time gap between transmissions from each ECU.
So it's like a polite system where everyone takes turns speaking, so no one gets drowned out.
Precisely. It's all about maintaining order and preventing data loss, especially in those time-critical situations.
Time critical, like what?
Imagine a flood of messages from your infotainment system, delaying a critical message from your braking system.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Not good at all.
Makes you realize just how much careful planning goes into designing these systems.
Absolutely. Every detail matters.
Speaking of clever design, what about these update bits mentioned in the document? They sound like they could be important for efficiency.
You're right on the mark. Update bits are like little flags attached to signals, indicating whether the data has changed since the last transmission.
So if a signal's value hasn't changed, the comma module doesn't bother sending it again.
Exactly. It's a brilliant way to reduce bandwidth usage and prevent the network from getting bogged down with redundant information.
That's smart. It's like only sending updates when necessary.
Precisely. It helps keep things running smoothly.
Okay, one last feature I want to touch on before we move on. Deadline monitoring. It sounds a bit ominous, like a ticking time bomb for messages.
Well, it's not quite that dramatic, but it is about ensuring that time-sensitive messages get where they need to go on time.
Okay, so why is that so important?
Well, in critical systems like braking or steering, even a slight delay could have serious consequences.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So deadline monitoring sets a strict time limit for these crucial messages to arrive.
And if a message misses its deadline,
The system knows something's wrong and can take action.
what kind of action?
It might rescind the message or alert a higher level control unit that there is a problem.
It's like having a fail-safe mechanism in place.
Exactly. It's all about ensuring reliability and safety.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. Signal management security optimization features, it's amazing how much complexity is packed into this COM module.
It's a testament to the power of software.
But there's still one crucial piece of the puzzle missing. How is this COM module actually configured for a specific car?
That's a great question. And that's where things get really interesting. Because the configuration process is what takes this generic COM module and tailors it to work perfectly in a particular vehicle model.
So it's like taking a blueprint and customizing it to build a house that meets the needs of a specific family.
That's a good analogy. And just like building a house, configuring the COM module requires careful planning and a deep understanding of the requirement.
Well, I'm definitely eager to learn more about this configuration process.
I think you'll find it quite fascinating.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the AUTOSAR Com module. Last time we left off with that cliffhanger about how this module is actually configured for a specific car. It sounds like that's where the real magic happens.
It is where things get really interesting because we're taking this generic piece of software and molding it into something that works perfectly within a specific vehicle.
So it's like tailoring a suit to fit someone perfectly.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, so where do we even begin with this whole configuration process?
Well, the good news is the AUTOSAR standard provides a framework. It gives us a set of guidelines and building blocks, but it's up to the engineers to assemble those blocks in a way that meets the unique needs of each vehicle.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution.
Not at all. Every car model has its own unique set of requirements.
Right, and the document mentions these things called containers and parameters. Are those our building blocks?
You could say that. Think of containers as logical groupings of related settings.
Okay, so like categories.
Yes, like
Yeah.
having separate containers for signals, IPDUs, and the signal gateway.
So it's a way to organize all the different settings and make them easier to manage.
Exactly. Organization is key when you're dealing with this level of complexity.
And what about those parameters?
Well, within each container, you have parameters. And those are the specific values that control how the COM module behaves.
So like the knobs and dials that you can adjust.
Precisely. And each parameter has a specific purpose.
So for example, a parameter might define something, like the size of an IPDU,
Oh,
or the transmission mode for a signal.
exactly. Or the deadline for a critical message to arrive.
Okay, so it's all about setting those parameters to the right values for the target vehicle.
That's the heart of the configuration process.
It sounds incredibly detailed.
It is, but thankfully engineers don't have to do all this by hand.
So no need to be a coding wizard to handle this part.
Not at all. There are specialized software tools that provide a much more user-friendly way to configure the COM module.
So it's like having a visual interface.
Exactly. You can connect elements, set parameters, using drop-down menus or sliders, and even simulate the behavior of the system.
That sounds way easier than writing lines of code.
Much easier, and it allows for much more precise control.
So it's like having a digital toolbox for building and testing your COM module configuration.
I like that analogy.
And you mentioned that these tools allow for a remarkable level of detail.
They do. You can define everything from the precise position of a signal within an IPDU to the algorithm used for filtering messages.
It's mind-boggling to think about all the work that goes into this.
It is a lot of work, but it's essential to ensure that all the different electronic systems in a car work together seamlessly and safely.
So those engineers have a huge responsibility.
They do, and they play a crucial role in making modern cars.
Yeah.
As sophisticated and reliable as they are.
It's incredible to think that this whole hidden world of software is running behind the scenes every time we drive.
It is, and it's a testament to the power of software engineering.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I've learned a ton about the AUTOSAR Com module.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's been fascinating to explore its role, its evolution, its security features, and even its intricate configuration process.
It's a complex but fascinating piece of technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So next time I'm driving, I'll be thinking about all that clever software working behind the scenes.
I hope so. It's something we should all appreciate.
And I want to give a big shout out to all those automotive software engineers who make all this possible.
They deserve a lot of credit.
So that's a wrap on this deep dive into the AUTOSAR Com module. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.